My name is Ryan. I'm the pastor at Central. It's great to be with you guys. I do want to say, yes, if you are able to help pitch in once in a while at 10 o'clock with our Pathfinders, and again, the bar is pretty low. If you can kind of tolerate little kids a little bit or pray about, then we'll take you. We'll train you. Isabel and Ben and others will help you kind of figure it out. But even just once a month, once every other, whatever you can do, we would love to be able to shepherd those little ones at this time at 10 o'clock. So I asked the 8:30 as well, and they're going to think and pray about it. We are in the middle of our series on Genesis, and we're calling it How Did We Get Here? And the reason, I think these ancient stories can speak to us today. These are old stories. They read like old stories. And let me get my sign out since we got this cool sign, so we can't let it go to waste. Hey, look at this. Let that wash over you this morning. Look at that. All right. And how did we get here? I think that the Bible, and Genesis in particular, speaks profoundly to our existence today and answers, or at least helps us address and conversate about a lot of these existential questions that we have. I'm not convinced that the book of Genesis was trying to be some kind of a treatise on science and these kinds of things, or like biological life per se. That's not what they were trying to do. They're trying to instead explain our existence, what God is like, relationships, and how we're to be in relationship with God and each other in the world. And so if you're here and you wrestle with like the science of the Bible, don't sweat it for now. That isn't what the Bible is trying to do a lot of times. It's rather trying to talk about a theological sort of framework for how we can live in the world. And these things they dealt with back then, we still deal with today. And so that's the thread I want to pull on, is how did we get here? So the title of my sermon this morning is, who do you think you are? Are you ready? Quick recap, we're in Genesis 27, I think is what Paul read. Genesis 1 through 11, so way in the beginning, it's really a preamble to the character that we know as Abraham, the father of the three major monotheistic religions today. Judaism, of course, Christianity, as Paul writes that we are now sons and daughters of Abraham in the Christian faith, and also Islam. And so Muslims, the 1.2 billion Muslims in the world, trace their lineage back to Abraham through Ishmael, whereas Christians go through Isaac. And so he's this very prominent character in the whole Hebrew Bible, but also in Genesis. And everything 1 through 11 is like a lead up to Abraham. So you have Adam and Eve, and things start well. There's a garden. There's plenty enough for everybody. There's grace and mercy. They're walking with God. It's beautiful. And then things begin to spiral out of control rather rapidly. You have the first murder in Genesis 4. Cain kills his brother Abel. And then Lamech does all kinds of shenanigans, and things begin to just sort of become a mess very quickly. And then in Genesis 6, God says he looks at the world and sees that every heart is corrupted and deceitful. And so he's like, what do I do? And so God, I would argue, baptizes the whole thing in to wash it clean, cleanses it in order to restart, to refresh, renew it. And there's always this line of faithful people. So Adam, and then his son Seth, and then Noah, and then Shem, and then Abraham. And through this line of people and their families, God tries to reconcile and like make things not a mess any longer. So in Genesis 11 and 12, he comes to Abram, or we call him Abraham, says, I'm going to bless you. I'm going to I'm going to call you out of this country, all you've ever known. I want you to risk it all and leave and go to where I tell you to. I'm going to bless you, not so you can just become, this fat cat who has all this money and a castle on the hill, but no, so you can bless the whole world. And if we're sons and daughters of Abraham, as Paul writes, that's our job. Whatever blessings we receive from God, we're to share them around and make the world a better place. God says with Abraham, I'm going to create a new humanity through you and your family, a community of peace and justice. So live like this in my ways. I'll teach you how to do it, and then you'll be a blessing and show the whole world how to do it. Fair enough? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Sonia. So then God blesses Abraham, and then Abraham is told, you're going to have a bunch of kids. And he sort of laughs because he's old. And so is his wife, Sarai, and we call her Sarah. And they keep getting older, and decades go by before finally they have a son. And they call him Laughter. Because when you're old and have a kid, you're like, what else are we going to do? Just laugh at this, because God is wild sometimes. And so they laugh. They call him Isaac, which means laughter. And then God asks Abraham to sacrifice his own son. Wild story. I don't like this story. But as I mentioned last week, so go back and listen to the sermon last week, I believe God is rewriting their understanding of religion, of God, and that relationship. And he ends the story by saying, hey, I don't want you to sacrifice your son. He's rewriting their idea of sacrifice, relationship with the gods, these kinds of things. And he says, hey, I'm not the kind of God who demands a sacrifice. I'm going to provide for you instead. And Abraham's like, whew, or actually Isaac's like, whew, that was close. So Isaac grows up. And here's where this prominent character Abraham begins to fade or recede into the background. And I was remarking this morning how oddly similar to our lives this is, you know? Think about your heroes when you were younger, your sports heroes, your celebrity heroes. And where are they now? A lot of them have sort of faded into the background or exited stage left. This is how life works. We're on stage for a brief moment, and then we're not. We're kind of invited to exit stage left and whatever is beyond, and we don't really know. That's kind of how life works. And so Abraham begins to recede, and his sons begin to take center stage. So Isaac grows older. The one who was on that mountain was going to be sacrificed. He grows up, and he has twin boys of his own. And this is what we read today, Jacob and Esau. And we're told that Jacob is a smooth-skinned man, because sometimes young men are smooth-skinned, you know what I'm saying? But Esau, now listen, here's the deal. Most of us will never be mentioned in the Bible, okay? That's a joke. None of you will be mentioned in the Bible, okay? And this guy was. Here's his one shot. He will be remembered throughout all of history. Like, this is his moment. And now, as he's watching, like, he's mentioned as a hairy man. Oh, my, you've got to be kidding me, God. What are you talking? God, I think you misspelled handsome. No, Esau, you're a hairy man. That's what it is, right? So we're told he's a hairy dude. He loves the outdoors. He's an avid hunter. He's favored by his father. Isaac favors Esau. He's the oldest. He's a rugged man's man. He loves to hunt. Imagine Ted Nugent, but with sandals on. Or maybe like a Near Eastern version of Teddy Roosevelt. Something like this, right? He like loves being outside. He loves to hunt and make stew out of this game meat. Like a man, he's a hairy boss too. But his brother, Jacob, is the opposite. He's favored by his mom, a bit of a mama's boy perhaps, stays at home all the time. He's a smooth-skinned young fella, and he likes to cook. And his mom, Rebecca favors Jacob. So already from the jump, you have these twin brothers who are kind of like wrestling in the womb, we're told, and this conflict continues to brew. So you don't have to be a family systems therapist to sense there's this conflict brewing between these brothers. And no, conflict brewing is not the name of a Minneapolis brewery, Bob Ruprecht, okay? It's not what it is. But there's this tension already in the family. These two brothers begin to have this sibling rivalry. Isaac, the father, favors Esau, his hairy son. And the mom, Rebecca, favors Jacob, the young, fair-skinned or smooth-skinned one. And so when Isaac gets older, as is the custom in the ancient Near East, he calls his eldest son, Esau, to his bedside. He's going to die. He wants to give him his blessing as the firstborn son. This was like a very prominent ritual for fathers to do in this patriarchal society. He calls Esau to his bedside to give him this fatherly blessing. And so it's this meaningful, significant, symbolic gesture loaded with meaning. And this is what he says. He says, he says, Esau, prepare me the kind of tasty food I like. I know you hunt, buddy, so go get me some game. Bring it back. We'll eat it together, that I might give you my blessing before I die. By the way, the word I, so it says, so that I may give you my blessing. The word I actually isn't I. It's the word nephesh in Hebrew. Everyone say nephesh. Here it is for you. There it is. Nephesh means soul. So Isaac is saying, hey, come to me, bring me this game, we'll make some stew together, or you'll make it for me. I'm old, I'm going blind, I can't hardly hear anything, and my soul wants to bless you. So what he's saying is like, hey, something deep within me, in my innermost being, the deepest parts of myself, I'm going to take that, I'm going to give it to you, my son Esau. This is what it means to have a blessing. I'm going to give you from my nephesh, from deep down in here, I'm going to give this to you from my innermost being. So Isaac sends him out. Rebecca, the mom, hears this and is livid because she favors the other brother, Jacob. So she concocts a plan. It's like, Jacob, come here. Go dress up like your brother and put on his clothes. And you know what? You're not that hairy. You have to figure it out. So he goes and gets goat skins and puts goat skins with hair all over his body. You know, like you did the last time you stole your father's blessing. Get the goat skins on. And he must be like, what am I doing? And then she sends him in there so he can pretend to be his brother, the hairy one, Esau. And so Jacob does. He puts on his brother's clothes, covers himself with goat hair, and goes in there to his dad pretending to be Esau. And then Isaac says, hey, who are you? He can't really see. He's getting old. And he goes, well, I'm your son. This is Jacob. He goes, I'm your son, your firstborn, Esau. Go ahead, smell me. Feel my hairy body. Jacob insists that he's somebody else. He pretends to be somebody he's not in order to take what didn't belong to him in the first place. And here's the thing, it works. Isaac is duped. He can't quite tell. Some things seem a bit off, but he rubs his arm, he smells the clothes, like, oh, yeah, that's right. And so he then in that moment takes this thing that's deep within his soul, from his nefesh, like this innermost being, this blessing, and he gives it to the wrong brother. He gives it to Jacob when it belonged the whole time to Esau. This is a serious offense that Jacob commits. An offense to his brother, of course, Esau, yes. An offense to his dad, Isaac. He lies to his dad. It's also an offense to the whole family. I'll explain what patriarchy meant in the ancient world in a minute, but it's an offense to all of them. And then Esau comes back in, and Isaac tells him, I already gave it to your brother, dude. And Esau is furious. And he vows before our father, actually after our father dies, once he's dead, I'm going to kill you. Jacob takes this as a subtle hint that now is a good time to go ahead and leave town. And he splits. He's going to kill him. And so he runs. Now, here's the deal. I was in Target the other day, and this woman next to me sneezed. Like, oh, God bless you. How pastoral was that, right? Thank you. I'm out doing the Lord's work at Target. Bless you. Now, if she had said, oh, it wasn't me, it was this guy over here. Oh, my bad, I take it back. Bless you instead. You're welcome, Elk River community. But that's how it works sort of in our modern idea of blessing. Oh, I bless you. And we sort of flippantly give out these blessings. This is not how it was in the ancient world at all. Remember, this thing came from his nefesh, from his soul, deep in his innermost part of his being. He takes this thing from his soul and he gives it to his son. It wasn't nothing, it was something. It was something that they thought could be stolen. Like you could hold it, maybe weigh it, measure it. It was like this thing that was deep and profound and substantial. A blessing now is just sort of like complimenting or gesundheit or bless you, whatever. That is not how it was in the ancient world. It was much more substantive back then. It had a weight to it. It could be stolen. You know, the things that weigh the most in life often cannot be weighed at all. The things that weigh the most often cannot be weighed. And so this thing from the father, from his nefesh, he gives it to the wrong son. And it's this thing that sort of has substance. It's not some meaningless, offhanded remark. It's his blessing from the father to the son. And once you give it, you can't take it back. So Esau's like, hey, bless me too. I already gave it to your brother. That thing that was so meaningful and powerful, it's already been done, and I cannot undo it. Now, here's the thing. In the ancient world, they had this system of organizing the family, called it a patriarchy. And I know patriarchy has sort of gotten a bad rap today, and for good reason. But back then, a patriarch was the father who owned all the material wealth and had all the possessions. Not so he could be just rich and live a lazy life and boss others around. That's where it gets a bad rap, because some people do that today. Don't do that. The role of the patriarch was to be a blessing to the whole tribe. Take care of the whole village. If someone got lost, you would use the resources as the father, the patriarch, to go and get them, go find them. If someone was sick, you'd use that whole family tribal money to go and take care of them until they either got better or died off. The patriarch was this magnanimous figure that was to take care of everybody. Now, when he died, they had to pass on that blessing and the wealth of the family to the next son, the firstborn son. Now, it's an ancient story, and it reads like that, okay? That's kind of how it was. So they would call in the firstborn son, and he would take on the mantle of being now the patriarch of the family, the one that takes care of everybody, that uses the resources that belong to everybody to make sure everyone had enough. They were all taken care of. They had enough food to eat. They were safe and secure. They were the ones that stayed up at night worrying about all the budget and the checkbook and all that kind of thing. And so then he would pass on that to the oldest son. Now that meant that all the goats and the cattle and the money and the rice and the wheat fields or the land, it would all go from you to the firstborn son. That's how it worked. So this is what he's kind of doing. Isaac calls Esau, of course Jacob sneaks in there instead, and he gives him all the stuff that the patriarch owned. So yes, the blessing is like goats and coins and land and these kinds of things. So it's sort of like a last will and testament of the Father. There's this very social or socio-juridical element to it. But it's not just that. It's not just money and land and goats. It's from his nefesh. It's something deeper, more powerful. It's his words of blessing over his son. This thing that weighs so heavy it cannot be weighed. And he gives it to the wrong son. This is what it meant to be a blessing. It's not just a compliment or a passing remark. It's not just coins and land. These things are fine. It's something deeper and even more substantive. See, these words have deep power. These symbols, these rituals that we engage in have deep meaning and power. It's like there's something alive in them. The great Walter Brueggemann says this about this passage. I love this. This is what he says. He says, the narrative, this one we're reading, presumes that symbolic actions have genuine and abiding power. Symbolic actions like a laying on of hands, they're not empty gestures signifying nothing. They're not nothing. There's something. The ritual act is a decisive event in which something has been done irrevocably. It's been given. I can't take it back. More happens than meets the eye. This narrative assumes and affirms that spoken words shape human life. If I asked you, have you ever had someone speak words over you, and those words, that ritual, that symbol, it shaped your life? I bet I'd hear dozens of stories about how that happened in your life. He goes on and says, the narrative presumes that symbolic action, language is not simply an exercise of propaganda. It's not just propaganda and manipulation, like our modern world tends to treat them. Words here are not a matter of indifference, which may be attended to or not, as is convenient. Here, when words are spoken in the ancient world by authoritative persons in proper context, they have substance. They mean what they say, and they must be handled with respect, for they're the means toward life or death. Or as Proverbs 18 puts it this way, death and life are in the power of the tongue. Friends, death and life are in the power of the tongue. Your words have meaning. These things we do have meaning. And what Isaac does when he blesses his son, the wrong son, has power. It has substance. What we say, rituals, prayers, laying on of hands, water, wine, juice, bread, these things have meaning when we stand and sit down and we pray out loud and we read the Bible. These things have meaning. They have substance. They have power in them. They're significant. This is why Jacob craves so desperately his father's blessing that was meant for Esau. He wants it. He longs for it. He longs for the firstborn blessing that belongs to his brother. He craves it so desperately. And he craves it so desperately, he dresses up like someone he's not and pretends to be something he's not in order to lie to his father. Now, here's the deal. You and I are not that dissimilar, are we? We crave the blessing of other people. I mean, flattery and compliments, sure, but we want someone to look at us and for them to know us and to say, I love you more than anything in the whole world. There's no one like you. You are utterly unique. I accept you for who you are, and I wish you blessings and goodness and grace and mercy. From their nefesh, from deep within, we long for this. Last summer, I was on a camping trip. It was a solo camping trip with this experiential thing out in the woods in Michigan with Kent Dobson was the leader of it, if you were here when he preached. And the middle of 3 days were spent, we were solo camping and fasting. It was incredible, awesome experience. But when we began, we would gather. He goes, hey, if anyone has any dreams, I do dream work, he said. Come in the morning, we'll talk about your dreams. I'm like, all right, cool. And that first night I had a vivid dream. It was very short. So I come to breakfast next morning, I'm going to tell him my dream. So we're all talking, and he goes, hey, who had a dream last night? I'm like, well, I did. He goes, what was it? So here's the dream. I had a dream that I was in a car with Grant Stoltman. You guys know Grant Stoltman? He was here at the 8:30 gathering earlier. He's a college kid. He's a sophomore. And my son Logan and him played baseball against each other when they were little and then with each other at the high school. He's maybe a year younger, I forget. And his mom was here too this morning, and they were both in the back of the car. So it was Grant and his mom. And I'm driving, vivid. And I'm driving, and I felt in that moment compelled. I've known Grant since he was a little boy. And I'm like, I felt compelled in my heart. And by the way, Carl Jung would say that things in your dreams are symbolic. So I don't think this meant anything to Grant necessarily. But so I'm driving in the car, and I felt compelled to turn around and bless him and to give him this benediction. So I did. I turned around. And in your dreams, things aren't like real life. I was not concerned at all about running into anything. I just turned around and started talking to Grant, started blessing him. And his mom was watching him just with these looks of, with this look of fondness in her eyes, as moms often do with their kids, And I was just blessing him. And I was done, and I turned around and then kept going, and that was the end of the dream. And then Kent was like, okay, why did you feel so compelled to bless him? I was like, I don't know. Just in this season of my life, my kids are getting older. My role as a pastor here, I'm getting older. And I just feel like I just want to bless people. And I want to speak good over them and just speak words of goodness. When all the time people are being torn down and cut down with words, I want to be a blessing to people. And then Kent goes, okay, cool. As a pastor, and Ryan, who does this for you? I started crying. Just started sobbing. Because I crave blessing. We all do. We long to have someone look at us and to know us and to speak good over us from deep within their soul, from within their nefesh, for someone to say, hey, there's no one like you. I love you for no reason. You're utterly unique. You're a gift. We long for this. We ache for blessing, not just compliments and flattery. Those are fine. But we long for blessing. And we're so desperate for it, many of us will dress up like somebody we're not in order to get it. And we'll pretend to be something that we're not in order to hear the blessings or the praises or the accolades of other people. We all do this because we long for blessing. Now, Jacob couldn't get it, so he concocts this plan, and he dresses up like his brother. He becomes someone different. He hides and pretends. And the father, Isaac's like, hey, you smell like, remember, he's getting older. He can't really see. He's like, you smell like Esau. You feel like Esau. Your clothes smell like Esau, but something's not quite right. You're not quite Esau. He knows, at least for a moment maybe. But we all do this, don't we? Many of you probably hate your job. Or let's say it this way. Some of you might hate your job. But you got to stick with it because you got to get that paycheck to get all the things that will earn the accolades of the people that you want to impress. You want their blessing. And so you stick with that job that you hate and is a drain on your life because you want the blessing so badly. Maybe you're in a relationship because you know if you dress up and look the part and say the right things, that person will give you their blessing. And so you pretend for years sometimes to be somebody you're not to get the blessing of somebody else. Maybe in your family you grew up in a system where you had to pretend to be something that you weren't in order to earn the blessing of your parents. And you wanted it so badly, but you had to pretend. Maybe you're here this morning because you know if you show up in church and look the part, others will be like, hey, bless you. I know nobody in this room probably, but other maybe friends of yours that you know of. Other churches have that. Because we desperately want the blessing. The problem is after many years of doing this, we forget who we actually really are. Like, who am I? I've been dressing in goat skins my whole life. I forgot who I even was. I'm pretending to be so-and-so or such and such. I forgot who I really and truly am. This is partly, I think, what Jung calls the shadow side. So Isaac has one final test for his son, who's a charlatan. He says, hey, come here and kiss me. I want to test. So he says, come kiss me, my son. And in that moment, Jacob gets what he's craving for. He has his father look at him and give him this blessing from his nefesh. He hears the words he's been longing for his whole life, this blessing of the firstborn son. The problem is, he's not Esau. And it's just not the same. It's never the same, by the way, when we do this kind of thing. Here's a quick takeaway. I'm just going to aside, or maybe not an aside, but if you're a parent in this room, it is your job to bless your children. all of them. By the way, the Bible story is really, I think, dramatically showing that God doesn't just bless one person. It's always the whole thing is blessed. And perhaps these ancient patriarchs are still living a bit with one foot in the ancient world and one foot of what God is doing, and God's like, just keep coming this way. So God's intention was always to bless the whole world. So parents, your job is to bless all your kids, to know them, to spend time with them, to speak good over them. Say, I love you for no reason. I see you. Oh, you're so good. I'm so glad you're here. You're unique. There's nobody like you. I love you. That's your job as parents, to bless them. But what happens if your parents didn't do that for you? Or maybe you haven't done it for your kids yet. Well, you can start, but what happens if you grew up in a screwed up family? Isaac realizes what he's done, by the way, when Esau, the real Esau, comes back and he's like, hey, I'm here, Father. And Isaac's like, what are you talking about? I just blessed you. And Esau is like, what? And Isaac says, I can't take it back. Then he says this, I gave the blessing to the other son, and indeed he will be blessed. He can't take it back. So it's like Isaac relents, because here's the thing. Way back when the two boys were in the womb, the mom, Rebecca, goes to the temple to get a prophecy about the birth of the two boys. And the prophet says, hey, the older one will serve the younger one. That's not how it usually works in the ancient world, but again, flipping of the script in the Bible. So all along, although the means by which it comes about wasn't good, and it's not being endorsed, but like all along, the plan was for the line of promise to keep going through Jacob. But Isaac wanted the other son so badly, the hairy one, the favored one, the man's man, the chosen one, the one who everybody liked. Isaac wanted him to be the blessed one. That was the tradition after all, and you can't go against tradition. But then he realizes, I've been fighting against God perhaps all the while. I give up. Let God have his way. And indeed, your brother will be blessed. He blesses him. See, we often think it's the favored one. Esau will be blessed. It's funny, some of the commentators they suggest that the storyteller in this moment doesn't even like Jacob. Like there's nothing praiseworthy about Jacob in the whole story. He's like a mama's boy. He stays at home. Nobody likes him. It's like, you wouldn't pick him. Not even the storyteller likes this kid. But that's who God blesses. We think, if I come from a good family, good home, good upbringing, I'll be blessed. And if you came from a screwed up family, good luck, sorry. But over and over and over again, God chooses the wrong people. I love it. And this way, God blesses the wrong person. He blesses the most screwed up member of the whole family. Like, yeah, give me that one. These are not superheroes in the Bible. They're ordinary people like you and like me. I love how Tim Keller says it. He says this about this story. I love it. He says this. He said, God brings his scandalous intervening grace into the lives of people who don't seek it, who don't deserve it, who continually resist it, and who don't even appreciate it after they've been given and been saved by it. They don't even appreciate it. This is who God saves and blesses. And then he goes on to say this. God works sheerly through grace. In case you are confused, it's all grace, baby. God works sheerly through grace. The outsider, the marginalized, the failure, the mama's boy. And Isaac finally surrenders to it. Here's how I want to end. Would you please stand? I'm going to do a quick theological turn, and then we're going to do something. Later on, much later, Jesus shows up. And we're told in Colossians 1 that Jesus is the firstborn over all creation in a number of ways. I would read it, but I'm burning daylight here, so I'm not, just read it on your own. Colossians 1, read the whole chapter. It's awesome. He's the firstborn of all creation, the firstborn raised from the dead. He's the chosen, the favored one, right, of the family. But remember, God doesn't just bless the firstborn son so that the firstborn can buy a nice ranch in Montana and retire and fly fish all by himself, as lovely as that does sound. He says, I want to bless you so you can bless the whole world. So he gives this from the soul, if I could take the liberty here, from the soul of God, the nefesh of God. He pours out this blessing into his son, Jesus. so that Jesus can bless the whole world. And here's how he does it. Paul says, and I will read you this one, Romans 8, this is what Paul writes about you. I think I have a slide, yeah. It says, the Spirit himself testifies with our spirit that we are God's children. Now, if we're God's children, then we are heirs. We're inheritors of the blessing, of the goats and the coins and the land, fine. But something deeper than that. The things which weigh the most cannot be weighed. We're heirs of God and co-heirs with Christ. You've been adopted, grafted in. You're sons and daughters of Abraham. That blessing is now yours. Do you hear me? Okay, I'm going to have you close your eyes if you want to. I'm going to give you a blessing. Here's how we're going to do it. I'm going to have you take 30 seconds in silence and ask God to bless you. Maybe you're here like, I've never done this before, Ryan. I don't even know if I'm a Christian or a person of faith. I don't even know if I believe in God. That's okay. We can experiment together. You can close your eyes and just ask God, the divine, the creator, what would you say to me? If you were to speak to me now, what image might come up in your mind? What words, what saying, what might come to you? Let the Spirit come and bless you. Then after 30 seconds, I am going to, from the deepest parts of my inner being, I want to bless you and speak life if I could over you. So I'll take 30 seconds. What might God say to you? And you can keep your eyes closed, or you can open them if you prefer. But now I want to bless you. Central, may you know that there is no one like you. There's not. You are utterly unique. And God loves you in the deepest parts of his soul. God loves you as you are, not as you should be. He's always loved you. His eye is on you. And you're to be a blessing, to receive the love and grace and mercy from God and to share it around. The world desperately needs blessing. May you know in the deepest parts of your soul that you are God's beloved sons and God's beloved daughters for no reason. And may you go and be a blessing. Amen.